This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, we're welcome everybody. I want to welcome all of our Torah Anytime viewers, and we're asked to mention that there's an option on TorahAnytime.com called Following. If anybody wants to be updated about Shiurim that were posted, they just need to click on the Following button. Okay, we're already within arm's length of Lag BaOmer. Now, as the years progress, I think Lag BaOmer is becoming more and more popular. And as Lag BaOmer comes closer every year, I have a big urge to delve a little bit into some of the more sublime aspects of the Torah. Last week already, you saw 2 weeks before, you saw we were going, so already within the week, you could just imagine what we have in store for this evening. And we begin with a very interesting comment from a sefer. I have a lot of Shiurim here tonight to introduce you to. The name of the sefer is called Eid Hagal Hazeh, written by Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, who literally wrote dozens and dozens and dozens of Svarim. And this sefer, Eid Hagal Hazeh, is all about Hagal Lag BaOmer. This sefer is dedicated to Lag BaOmer. And Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, who is one of the leading Mekubalim today, and as far as I know, one of the only Mekubalim that is recognized by Gedolei Yisrael, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel observes a very interesting phenomenon that takes place in Eretz Yisrael. And that is, Eretz Yisrael has many, many kvarim. Everybody knows you have Har Hazesim, Har Menuchos, you have Tanoim buried in Israel, you have Amoraim, and nevertheless, we could say with complete certainty that of all the kvarim in Eretz Yisrael, the one that draws the biggest crowd is certainly the kever of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer. And the question is, what exactly is it about his kever that is so attractive, that draws such large crowds? Ask Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, paraphrasing the pasuk, "Ha-mibli ein kvarim b'Yerushalayim." What? There are not enough kvarim in Yerushalayim? On Har Hazesim, there are not enough kvarim? You have Nevi'im buried on Har Hazesim. You have kings of Malchus Beis David. Are there not enough kvarim in Yerushalayim and Har Menuchos? You have Tanoim, you have Amoraim, you have Goinim in Eretz Yisrael. You have people who lived in the times of Tanakh. Even Ma'aras HaMachpelah does not draw the crowds that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai draws in Meron. Ask Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, Yerushalayim Kevarim Savivla. Paraphrasing the pasuk, Yerushalayim is surrounded by kevarim, right? Paraphrasing Yerushalayim Harim Savivla. So what exactly is it? How do we understand this phenomenon? And if you go to the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai, you have people from all walks of life. You have Admorim, you have Tzadikim, you have Chasidim, you have Rosh Yeshiva, you have Jews who are not observant, you have Jews from all crosses of life, normal people, and those who have not yet made it to that threshold. You have all kinds of people who go to Meron on Lag BaOmer. How do we explain this phenomenon? Now, in general, let's talk about going to Kvarim in general, and specifically the kever of Shimon Bar Yochai. And a very amazing tshuva over here. This tshuva is written in the 18th century. The name of the tshuva is Shas Tshuva Sedei Haaretz. And he talks about in general about how worthy is it to go to a kever. And he says something very interesting. He writes, you could go to Kvarim provided that it does not disturb your ordinary Avodas Hashem. In other words, if you're going to go to a kever, where are you going to daven mincha? I don't know. I'll find a mincha, but I have to go to the kever. You're going to give up mincha with a minyan to go down with the kever? What about your regular shiur? You have a shiur every day. No, but I have to go to the kever. So says the Sefer Stei Haaretz, as long as it doesn't interrupt your regular avodas Hashem, but if it's giving me, what about Birchas Hamazon b'Kavana? Benching, I'll worry about it a different time. No. As long as you'll be able to fulfill all the required mitzvahs, it will not disturb your regular avodas Hashem. Especially, he says, a Talmid Chacham who is involved in learning, to give up a day of learning, to go to a kever, or somebody who is a marbitz Torah, to give up Torah barabim, to go to a kever, that requires very, very careful analysis and judgment, and that really requires a big shikol hadas, whether it's worthwhile to give up one's regular avodas Hashem to go to a kever. By the way, this tshuva is quoted by the Stei Chemed, where the Stei Chemed writes, Uvadidi hava uvda. Look at number 3, where Stei Chemed writes, I know about myself that going to a kever as worthwhile as it is, and as worthy as it is, and as elevating experience as it is, nevertheless, it disturbs, it interrupts one's normal seder of Avodas Hashem, and therefore, before going, you have to make a real honest evaluation whether this is a worthwhile endeavor. Says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, but there's another thing to think about also, and that is, just think about the logic of going to a kever. Just think about what's happening. We know that all tefillah in the world goes up to heaven through the porthole of the Shari Shamayim, the gates of Shamayim, which are where? Where are the Shari Shamayim? Where are the Shari Shamayim? In Yerushalayim, right? Ein zeh kiyim beis Elokim v'zeh, and not anything else. V'zeh Shari Shamayim. So it says Rabbi Hillel, he doesn't say exactly. Going to a kever is a little bit like Chumash. It's like, here you're going to go to the kever so that what? You're going to drive an hour to the kever so that as soon as you daven, that tefillah could go back to Yerushalayim and go. Imagine a guy, he lives in Yerushalayim. What seichel is there to leave Yerushalayim and go to the kever?
Go to Uman.
You're going to go to some kever in a different country. A guy, he's talking about someone who lives in Yerushalayim. In Yerushalayim, your tefillah goes straight up. So you're going to go to the kever so that the kever has to send the tefillah back to Yerushalayim? What's the point? Save yourself the postage, right? Save the stamp. Stay in Yerushalayim and the tefillah will go straight up. Okay, there are definitely certain great holy qualities of davening at a kever, but this is also, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, something to think about. He says he's not demeaning chas v'shalom the holy practice of going to the kever of Shema Yechai, but nevertheless these are all variables to take into account when one is evaluating whether it's worthwhile to make the pilgrimage to the kever of Shema Yechai. Okay. But says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, something very important to bear in mind. Look at number 5. This is all from the Sefer Eid Hagal Hazeh, from Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. He says if somebody, because of certain circumstances beyond their control, or if they live far away, or if someone lives in America, and they can't make it to the kever of the Rashbi, the kever of Shema Yechai and Lag BaOmer, is there any eitzah to, have a little bit of the feel for Lag BaOmer without actually going to the kever? So, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, and this is an eitzah anytime a person would like to visit a kever, be it kever avos or a kever of tzaddikim, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, by learning their Torah, by learning the Torah of that gadol, or by speaking the praise of that gadol, that is a way of sort of vicariously almost feeling and really almost being there. Why? Because the same way we have by karbanos, if you read about the carbon, if you say Parshas Oila, it's Ki'ilu Hikrev Oila. If you read the Parsha of the Karban Chatas, it's as if you brought the Karban Chatas. So if you learn the Torah of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, it's as if you're at the kever of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Plus, he says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, Chazal tell us in the Yerushalmi that we don't make monuments for tzaddikim, right? You're not going to find some molten, graven image of the Chafetz Chaim anywhere, right? Or we're not going to have an image. We're not going to make a statue of Rav Moshe Feinstein. We don't need statues. You have the Igros Moshe. You have the Mishnah Brura. Their words, Chazal say, Divreihem hein nefashos. Chazal say, in oisin nefashos l'tzadikim, Divreihem hein zechroinam. Which means, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, the quality of the neshama of the tzaddik is contained, is encapsulated in their words. So you don't have to go to the kever. You want to daven at the kever of Shema Yechai, so open up the Zohar, say some passages of the Zohar, especially a Sfardi. Your Siddur has at least 100 different things from the Zohar in it. Read something from Rav Shema Yechai, and it's as if you're taking the journey to Meron, and then you could learn the Zohar, you could daven, and it's as if you're there. So this is a wonderful method for those who can't make it. If you can't make it Sunday to the kever of Shema Yechai, especially now, to buy a ticket now, tickets are very expensive. All right, after tonight, the tickets are a lot of money. Probably more than $2,000. So you could go to the farm store, buy the whole set of the Zohar, maybe $200. You open it up, you read some things, you say some Tehillim, and it's Ki'ilu you're there. Ki'ilu you're there. Plus, we could add a little historical tidbit, and that is, we know, now, nobody has the birth certificate of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. As far as I know, the birth certificate of Shimon Bar Yochai is, not extant. We don't know where it is. So we don't know exactly what day he was born. But many Svarim, right, including the Bnei Yissaschar, that we know Rosh Yochai passed away on Lag BaOmer, so we could safely presume then that he was also born on Lag BaOmer. So it's the day of his birth, it's the day of his Patira, and we have a tradition. Now if I were to ask you, who wrote the Zohar HaKadosh? What would the answer be? Shimon Yochai, right? No, he did not even write one word of the Zohar HaKadosh. Who wrote the Zohar? His student, Rabbi Shimon Yochai, dictated the Zohar primarily on the day of his Patira. So the Zohar is not only the words of Shimon Yochai, but the words that he taught primarily on Lag BaOmer. And therefore, by learning his Torah on Lag BaOmer, Rabbi say, in a way, it's as if you're there. You are encountering the holy soul of Shimon Yochai. It's like you're there. If you have a Eis Tzara, if you need to daven for something on Lag BaOmer, and you really want to be there, what do? Open up the Svarim, read a little bit, learn a little bit, you daven, Ke'ilu, you made the pilgrimage. Okay, Rabbi Say, if that's the case, we should bear in mind that the learning of the Zohar plays an extremely important role in the future history of the Jewish people. What role does the Zohar play? The Zohar himself tells us, this is very important. Take a look at number 7. The Zohar tells us in Parshas Vayera that really the secrets of the Zohar were meant to be hidden, were meant to be concealed, were not meant for widespread dissemination. But nevertheless, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai told his Talmidim, and the background of the story goes like this. The background of the story was some of his Talmidim were reading some of the deep mystical secrets of the Torah, whereupon they were delving a little bit too far, and the whole document was consumed in smoke. So they go to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, they say, Rebbe, what's going on? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says, look, God doesn't want you to know this now. However, look on the third line, number 7. Amar loin Reb Shimon. So on Sunday, if you get in the mood of going to Meron, you have an itch to go to Meron, you could read the Zohar number 7. It'll be like you're there. Look at on the third line. Amar loin Reb Shimon. Less ra'avasa de kuchabrichu b'dag. God doesn't want you to know this. De yiskale kol kach la'ama. That this should be revealed to the world. Bechad yehei karev liyoymei Mashiach. But as the days of Mashiach approach, afilu raboye, that means even children, da'alma, zeminin le'ashgacha tamirin dechachmasa, are destined to find the secrets of wisdom. Uleminda beikitzin, to know secrets, v'chushbinin, and calculations. Uvahahu zimna izgalya l'chayla, and at that time, right before the time that Mashiach comes, the secrets of Kabbalah will become known to the world. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is making a prediction, okay? Shimon Bar Yochai is making a prediction. Before the time of the coming of Mashiach, the secrets of mysticism, of Kabbalah, will become known to the world. And in what is perhaps the most famous saying in all of the Zohar HaKadosh, okay? Somebody asks you, what's the most famous saying of the Zohar? You're about to read it in number 8. It's the Zohar in Raya Mehemna. Now, what's Raya Mehemna? Right, you have to know what this is at least, even if you never crack it open. What Raya Mehemna is, from Moshe Rabbeinu, mystical secrets from Moshe Rabbeinu. Raya Mehemna means the trustworthy shepherd, and it is considered the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, that's what it is. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, and this is, as far as I know, the most famous statement in all the Zohar. Look on the third line. Uvegin, and because the Asidin Yisrael lemita meilana dechaye, because in the future the Jewish people are going to taste from the tree of life. What's the tree of life? Di'ihu hai sefer hazoyar, which is a sefer of the Zohar. Yipkun bei min galusa barachame, they will be redeemed from galus with great mercy. That's what the Zohar says. That la'asa lavai, in order for Mashiach to come, the Jewish people will taste from the Zohar, and that will usher in the Yemais HaMashiach. And by the way, this statement of the Zohar is not just a isolated statement. The Ramchal, in what many consider his most important sefer, which is Adir B'Amoraim, the Ramchal bases the sefer Adir B'Amoraim on this line of the Zohar. Take a look at number 9. The Ramchal writes, second line, Min hatikunim hagadolim sheniskanu ba'olam haya sefer hazayah. One of the greatest corrections, one of those, the one item that could cure and correct and be masak in the world more than anything else is the book of the Zohar. Kasher nemar shvacha b'chama kodesh mimenu atzmai. As the Zohar himself tells us. Why? What is the function of the Zohar? Kihu legeula huchan. The Zohar was created to prepare the geula. Ulahatzmiach keren Yeshua l'beis Yisrael, and to cause great salvation to come forth for the Jewish people. And then the Ramchal quotes this Zohar that we just read, that what? Uvegin de asidin Yisrael lemitam eilone dechaye de yuhai sefer Zohar. That because in the future the Jewish people are going to taste from the Zohar, yipkun be min galusa barachame. So now, let's just get this clear. If Reb Shimon Bar Yochai would walk into this room right now and we would interview him, we say, Reb Shimon, what needs to be done to bring Mashiach? What do you think he would answer? It's very clear. He would say, you got to learn the Zohar. Now, you could say, well, maybe, he wrote the Zohar, so of course he's a big fan of the Zohar. Well, you have to know, Reb Chaim Vital. Now, Reb Chaim Vital is the main recorder of the Kabbalah, the Arizal. If I were to ask you, how many Sfarim did the Arizal write? Nothing. He didn't write anything. Arizal, everything from the Arizal was recorded by Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital wrote Shar Kavanos, Shar HaMitzvahs, Arba Meo Shekel. He wrote Shar HaGogulim. He wrote Tamei HaMitzvahs, Likutei Torah. All the Sfarim that we know from the Arizal, Shar HaHakdamos, was all recorded by Reb Chaim Vital. Reb Chaim Vital wrote a very, very important introduction to something called Shar HaHakdamos. And this introduction is so important that in Reb Chaim Vital's most important work, which we have over here, Eitz Chaim, I just got a hold of it. Now these farms are very expensive, extremely expensive. But look, you got to have it. So Reb Chaim Vital in the Hakdama, in the front of the Sefer Eitz Chaim, by the way, you should come up after the Shiur and just open the Sefer. So at least you could say once in your life you open the Sefer Eitz Chaim, maybe look at a few words. It won't hurt. It won't harm you. But in the Hakdama to the Sefer Eitz Chaim, the Reb Chaim Vital wrote a special Hakdama that's normally printed in the Shar HaHakdamos, and it's really put into the Eitz Chaim to know the history of Kabbalah. And Reb Chaim Vital writes the following very frightening words. Look at number 10. Says Reb Chaim Vital, if you look around the world, Jewish people are not learning Kabbalah. And by the way, once you've entered the Shiur for the first 10 minutes or so, you can't leave anymore, because you're going to get the wrong impression. So you need to stick it out. But says Reb Chaim Vital, if you look around the world, Jews are not learning the Zohar. Nobody's learning Kabbalah. He says Reb Chaim Vital, Harei nizbaru kol hakitos asher ba'am b'nei Yisrael, asher kulam ke'echa nimnu l'hachzik v'chachma zos. There are no Jews embracing the wisdom of Kabbalah. And everyone has their reason. Says Reb Chaim Vital, to the point where it's fulfilled in us, the pasuk, Ein menahel la, we have no leaders anymore. Because even Talmid Chachamim have abandoned and given up hope from understanding this knowledge. Says Reb Chaim Vital, because unfortunately people think that Gemara, it's good enough, Mishnah, it's good enough, Halacha, it's good enough, and they feel self-satisfied with just knowing the revealed portions of the Torah. Says Reb Chaim Vital, the last two lines, look at this. Hakol taloi be'esek hachachma hazois. Everything good that the Jewish people anticipate is dependent on this wisdom. And our refraining from and being involved with this, he goyremes ichor ve'ikov binyan beis mikdashenu b'sevartenu. You want to know why we have no beis hamikdash? Because nobody learns Kabbalah. You want to know why we're in Golus? Because nobody learns Kabbalah. You want to know why there's Jewish tragedy? Because nobody learns Kabbalah. So now what? So now the question is, and by the way, says Reb Yaakov Hillel, now we understand very well this unusual phenomenon that everyone flocks to the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Because knowingly or unknowingly, the Jewish neshama, whether it's conscious of it or not, knows the truth. And the truth is, what our generation needs more than anything else, and do not leave now, is our generation needs to learn Kabbalah. Now, please don't leave, because do not listen to what I'm saying exactly. But more than anything else, in order to bring Mashiach, says the Zohar, says Reb Chaim Vital, what's holding up the Beis HaMikdash is the fact that Jewish people do not learn Kabbalah. And that is why, somehow instinctively, the Jewish soul is drawn to the Rashbi, is drawn to Rav Shimon Chai, because in the last generation, in the Ikvasa de Mashiach, right before Mashiach comes, knowingly or unknowingly, we're instinctively drawn magnetically to what is going to give us the successful tool to bring Mashiach, and that is Rav Shimon Chai. So whether the guy knows the Aleph from the Beis, or whether his head is on forward or backward, or if he knows anything about Judaism, it doesn't matter. His neshama recognizes that the Rashbi is where it's at. What's going to bring Geula? Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. We love our Avos, we love our Tanoim, Amoraim, Nevi'im. There may be greater, but what we need today in 2014 is Tairas Rashbi. So says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel that, in his opinion, this explains this unusual phenomenon, how everyone in the world is flocking to the kever of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So now, let's ask ourselves honestly, is that what we need to do? I mean, that's what the Zohar tells us, and that's what Reb Chaim Vital tells us. But is that my job? Is, a regular observant Jew, is he now supposed to say, well, there's no Mashiach isn't here, so I better start learning the Kisvei Ari and the Zohar? We know there are major restrictions about learning Kabbalah. Even the Rambam tells us, look on number 12, the Rambam Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah tells us on the 5th line, V'ani omer, and I say the following. Now you should know, if the Rambam says, I say, this is based on his collective knowledge of Kol HaTorah Kula. The Rambam says, Ein roi letayo bepardes, don't take a stroll in the orchard. What does that mean? That means don't start learning Kabbalah. Unless you filled up your stomach with bread and meat. What's bread and meat? Isser v'heter, mutter and usser. Do not learn Kabbalah unless you know Yeredeya, Choshen Mishpat, Even Ha'ezer, or Chaim. You ask a guy, why are you learning the Zohar? Do you know Masechta Chulin? Masechta Chulin, what's that? I don't know Masechta Chulin. Why are you learning Kabbalah? You know what a nat bar nat is? I know a walnut, but what's a nat bar nat? Do you know Eino ben Yaima ben Yatan? No, never heard of it. But I know about the Oilamos and Atzilus and Yitzir. So the guy, he's not on the right path. Because you can't start learning Kabbalah until your stomach is filled with the main body of the Torah. And what's the main body of the Torah? Halacha, mutter and aser. Do you know what Masechta Be'ah is? Oh, I know eggs. It's about eggs. Right? The guy doesn't know. He doesn't know Shabbos from Yom Tov. He doesn't know Birchas Kriya Shema from Kriya Shema. He doesn't know Zman Kriya Shema. If he doesn't know Masechta Brachas, Masechta Shabbos, Masechta Eruvin, Masechta Megillah, Masechta Yuma. Do you know Masechta Yuma? I know Huma, Yuma. Well, I don't know anything. The guy doesn't know anything. He's learning. He's already a Makubal. Says the Rambam, this is not correct. This is not correct. Even though the Gemara terms Kabbalah, Divrei Dvarim Gedolim, and Gemara, Dvarim Ketanim, says the Rambam, you cannot be a human being as a Jew unless you first know Shas. And if you learn Shas, that will get you to Olam Haba. Do not learn Kabbalah, says the Rambam, unless you've filled yourself up with the main body of the Torah. So you say, yeah, the Rambam was a rationalist. But do the Mekubalim also give such restrictions? You should know, as sternly as the Rambam speaks, the Mekubalim speak much stronger about those who learn Kabbalah who are not Roy. The Ramak. I just got the Sefer, my father gave me the Sefer on Sunday. Our Na'arav, I think it came from Europe. Our Na'arav is written by the Ramak. Ramosha Cordovero. Ramosha Cordovero writes in Parak Aleph, in Chelek Aleph Parak Vav, he says like this, that there are people making a big mistake. He says, Hiktsas mibnei doreinu, there's some people in our generation, Shein lohem mavoi, they have no introduction, Loi b'mikra, they don't know Chumash. Hey sir.
Excuse me, you have a shiur.
Hey, he says, Loi b'mikra, they don't know Psukim and Chumash. V'loi b'mishnah, they don't know Mishnayos. V'loi b'gemara, they don't know Gemara. V'heim oiskim b'chachma zu, they're involved in Kabbalah. Ve'ein safek shehem toyim taos gemura mikana ta'amim. They're making a big error. Now listen carefully to his words. You know what their major error is? Listen to this. This is amazing. What's the error of somebody who learns Kabbalah and doesn't know Chumash, Mishnah, Gemara? I would say, if he doesn't know the ABCs, how could he be advanced? No, listen to what the Ramak says. The main error is Ho'echad Shaloi Ra'u Or HaPilpul Miyameim V'loi Noga Oiroi Aleim. This is how I understand it. If you want to learn Kabbalah, you need to know how to think. And you can't know how to think unless you've been disciplined and trained in the logic of the Gemara, unless you're what we call a lamdin. If you have never learned a K'tzais HaChoshen, or a Shev Shmaitza, or an Avnei Miluim, or a Rabbi Kiva Eger, or a Marsha, and you have not sharpened and honed your analytical skills, then when you hear all of these things about worlds, you're going to be floating in outer space. You're going to have no idea what it's talking about. The first thing you need to know is that your brain needs to be warmed by the light of pilpul. Pilpul means the sharp Gemara analysis. Just to be able to know how to think clearly. So somebody who advances to Kabbalah without being trained, without honing in his intellect, he's out in the outer space. He's floating out there. He is not someone who's going to have any understanding of it. And by the way, Reb Chaim Vital says the same thing. Look at number 14. Reb Chaim Vital, back in the Sefer Eitz Chaim, in the introduction, he says like this: Al yoymar adam el chali. Let a person not say, I'm going to go. V'esok b'chachmas HaKabbalah, and be involved in learning Kabbalah, mikoydem sheyasek b'Torah b'Mishnah v'Tam, before learning the basics. Because Chazal say, Al yikanes adam lefardes elam kain malei kreis v'vas v'yayin. Do not enter the orchard unless you fill up your stomachs. Says Reb Chaim Vital, you know what it's like? If you learn Kabbalah without a strong basis in Nigla, you're like a neshama without a guf. By the way, if a soul in heaven performs mitzvahs, what reward do we give the soul? Nothing. Only in this world with a body could you be rewarded. So if you learn Kabbalah without Gemara, you get no reward at all. You're like a soul floating in outer space without a guf. But by the way, he says, if you learn Nigla without Nistar, you're like a body without a soul. You're also in darkness. But you're much better off. At least you're planted in this world. Otherwise, you're just like a dust particle, blowing in the wind. So says Reb Chaim Vital. So on the one hand, he's telling me that Mashiach can't come until people learn Kabbalah. And on the other hand, he's telling me that in order to learn Kabbalah, you have to be a Veltz Talmid Chacham. Or at least you have to have a strong basis in Gemara, in Poskim, in Halacha. So ask Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, then who is supposed to be learning Kabbalah to bring Mashiach? Some Hollywood actor? That's who's going to bring Mashiach. Some, in California, in the Kabbalah Center, that they're bringing Mashiach? Obviously not. Obviously, in order to learn Kabbalah, you have to first be a Talmid Chacham. So ask Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, so who exactly is going to bring Mashiach? The people who are learning Kabbalah, he says, are mushchasim, are Rishoyim, are Menoafim, not all of them, many of them, unfortunately. Kav says, he quotes the Arizal. Arizal says, when you mourn the Churban Beis Hamikdash, you need to mourn the fact that the secrets of the Torah have fallen into the hands of the dark side. That's part of the Churban HaTorah. And on the other hand, the Tamid Chachamim, there are very, very few who are able to be on the level to even delve into Kabbalah. So who's going to bring Mashiach exactly? The Zohar says that only when Klal Yisrael tastes the taste of the Zohar will Mashiach come. So ask Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, take a look at the end of number 15. Umeyato yesh lahakshos. So now we can ask the following question. Certainly God will not abandon us. There are very few true Kabbalists today, especially compared to the earlier generations. Nevertheless, we know in order for Mashiach to come, this is what we need. What hope can the Jewish people have for Mashiach? In order for Mashiach to come, we need to learn Kabbalah. In order to learn Kabbalah, you have to be a real Talmid Chacham. So says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, we are up the creek without a paddle. What hope do the Jewish people have to bring Mashiach to Canaan?
Why did also the community did not protest Rabbi Berg's movement? And
I don't know. I'm not getting into. I can't get into that right now.
This is so important.
Okay, but I have a lot.
They did protest.
Okay, Rabbi said this is the question of Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, to which he advances the following very interesting concept. And in another sefer, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, called Gevuras Ha'ari. Now, the Ari refers to the Arizal, right? In the sefer Gevuras Ha'ari, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel an amazing thing. He says, I'm going to tell you a Pesach Tikva, an opening of hope, that Klal Yisrael could rely on and lean on in order to say that we are indeed fulfilling that which the Zohar HaKadosh tells us, that in order to bring Mashiach, you need to learn Kabbalah. So says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, if you look in all the Halacha Sfarim, if you look in all the Sifrei Halacha always bring down the opinion of the Arizal and the Zohar HaKadosh. In every siman in Shulchan Aruch, the Poskim bring down, what does the Ari say? What does the Zohar say? What does the Ari say? What does the Zohar? Yeah, the Shulchan Aruch says this, but what does the Ari say? Yeah, the Ramah says this, but what does the Zohar say? On every siman in Shulchan Aruch, we're always interested to know what the Arizal says. Says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, to the point where the minhag of the Sfardim is that they paskin like the Arizal even against Meron bet Yosef, as is well known. That the minhag of the minhag of Sfardim is to always follow the psak of the Ari, even neged psak Maram. And how do we daven? Look, the Sfardim open up their siddur, they're davening Nusach Arizal. And many Ashkenazim, Hasidim, they're davening Nusach Ari. So says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, yes, in our generation there are very few who are worthy to learn the Zohar, who are worthy to learn the Arizal. We can't understand it. It's not for us anymore. But what we're lacking in learning, we fulfill in practice. In practice, every halacha that we do is based on the Ari. We don't make a move without the Ari. You wake up in the morning, you wash Negov Aser. It doesn't say in Shulchan Aruch to wash Negov Aser. It doesn't say in the Gemara to wash Negov Aser. It's from the Zohar. We don't make a move without Kabbalah. Today, when you get married, how do you get married? You give your wife $1 bill? No. You give her a barrel of barley? No. You give a ring. Where does it say in the Gemara to give a ring? It says kesef or shava kesef. It's the Zohar. So everything we do is based on Kabbalah anyway. So yes, because in today's day and age, all of our practices are based on the Zohar and the Arizal, therefore we could safely say that the Kabbalah and the traditions and the teachings of the Ari and the Reb Shimon Yochai are widespread, are nafutz b'chol haaretz, and in fact, this is the fulfillment of the promise of Reb Shimon Yochai that before Yemais HaMashiach, the Jewish people are going to partake of the Zohar HaKadosh. And in fact, if you look in the Chidah, this is Ayam V'Naira, there's a sif in Shulchan Aruch. I mean, this is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing what the Chidah says. The Shulchan Aruch tells us, what is the last of the Birchas HaShachar? We say, Shosani Goy, right? Shosani Oved, Pokeach Ivrim, Mal B'Sharumim, Mater Asurim. What's the last bracha? Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu Mechalom, Hanoisem Layoiv Kayach. Should you say that bracha? What do you mean should you? Of course you should. Shulchan Aruch says you should not say that bracha. Take a look at number 17. It says, Shulchan Aruch and Arachaim Siman Mem Vav, Yesh Noyagin Levarech Hanoisem Layoiv Kayach. There are those who have a minhag to make the bracha Hanoisem Layoiv Kayach. The Ein Divrei Nirin, and it's wrong. You should not make the bracha. Now, the Ashkenazim follow the psak of the Ramah, Haga, Acha Minhag Pashut, B'nei Ashkenazim, La'imra Ashkenazim make the bracha. Any Sfardim here? Yeah? Do you make the bracha? Yes. But Meron bet Yosef says not to. Says the Chidah, we love the Beis Yosef. He's the best. We accept everything he says, except if the Arizal argues. If the Ari argues on the Beis Yosef, we follow the Arizal. Why? Listen to this. Because the Beis Yosef didn't know what the Arizal said. Had he known, he would have retracted his psak.
But they lived at the same time in Tzfat.
But you know how it is. Says the Chida, look at this. Atan, in the Birkei Yosef, the Mishnah Berurah quotes from the Birkei Yosef. Says the Chida, Ata nispashed haminag begalilasenu levarich zayis bracha. We make this bracha al pi kisvei Rabbeinu Arizal. Kiaf de kibalnu hayrais Meron. Even though we always accept the psukim of Maran bet Yosef, Kimlan, we Sfardim hold. De Omole Maran Afura Das Kodesh Ari, had Beis Yosef seen the Ari, Gam Hu Yoide Lebracha. The Beis Yosef would have agreed. The Beis Yosef didn't know what the Arizal said, but had the Beis Yosef known, he would have said, Ari, I would never dare argue on you. And then the Chida adds, and also, look in the Magen Avram, who quotes the Knesset Hagdolah, that somebody claims they heard from the Beis Yosef at the end of his life, he retracted. But we're going to put that aside for a moment. So the Chida is advancing a principle, and that principle is that even though Sfardim follow Beis Yosef, not if the Ari argues. Why? Because when the Ari argues, we say, had Maran bet Yosef, but Beis Yosef learned with a Malach. Why would... No, but Arizal learned with Eliyahu Hanavi, so he one-upped him. Right? Yeah, Beis Yosef had a Malach, Magid Meisharim. Yeah, but he had Eliyahu Hanavi, so Eliyahu Hanavi is greater than a Malach. So therefore, if the Beis Yosef would have known what the Arizal said, he would have retracted. And therefore, by the way, the Chida writes in the Toiv Ayin that the Beis Yosef did not know 1/100th of the Arizal. That's what he writes. That's what he writes. I didn't bring it, I forgot to bring it, but he writes, he didn't even know 1/100th of the greatness of the Arizal, and unfortunately the Arizal died in his time.
Who wrote this?
The Chida. Yeah. The Chida. So the Chida writes, Ga'onu Zenu, as far as I know, a very rare title we give the Chida, Ga'onu Zenu. Ga'onu Zenu. The Chida writes, and therefore, based on the Chida, and the Ben Ish Chai also writes, Ben Ish Chai writes, listen to this. What if you have a machlokes poskim, and the Shulchan Aruch says, you know what makes the bracha? Ben Ish Chai says, don't make the bracha, Safek bracha is lahakel. But if the Arizal says to make the bracha, then, when it says the Ben Ish Chai, when the Arizal says to make a bracha, we do not apply the rule, Safek bracha is lahakel. We have nothing as baruch kachama as the psukim of the Ari. This is what the Chida writes, this is what the Ben Ish Chai writes, and says Reb Yaakov Hillel, minhag of Sfardim for many generations as they follow Ari against anybody, and therefore we could safely say in our generation, Kabbalah has spread throughout the world. Kabbalah? I don't even know Gemara. Yeah, but the way we act like big Mekubalim even though we don't know it, and therefore the practices of Kabbalah are widespread throughout the world. This is the answer of Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. This is his defense. This is his explanation for how Mashiach could come in our generation. Who am I to stick my neck into here? So, I once said that, and somebody was sitting here and said, you're right. Right? But, in any event, what can we do? I would humbly say, and perhaps go in a different direction than Rabbi Yaakov Hillel. And that is because, certainly for Ashkenazim, we don't take this approach. For Ashkenazim, the Arizal was certainly Kamalach Hashem Tzvakos, and we don't even have a right to say how great he was. That we're so nothing that we don't even have a right to praise him. But nevertheless, when it comes to Halacha, Ashkenazim do not give more credibility to the Arizal than any other Paisek. Not more than the Magen Avram, not more than the Artzos HaChayim, not more than the Magen Giborim, not more than the Chaye Adam. The Arizal is Echad Min HaPoskim for the Ashkenaz. In fact, if you look in the Tshuvas of the Igros Moshe, in Chelek Dalet Siman Gimel, somebody asked of Moshe, what we're going to have Shavuos night, those who stay up all night know that Ashkenazim do not make the bracha in the morning Elekai Neshama, Berchas HaTorah, and Hamaver Shena. Because it's a machloikis achroinim, and we say Safek brachos lahakel. Even though the Arizal says to make the bracha. So someone asked Rav Moshe that there's a well-known principle that when halacha doesn't know what to do, Kabbalah could be machriya. Let's say you have a machloikis and poskim, you could use Kabbalah, You're not going to paskin like the Mekubalim against the Poskim, but when the Poskim argue, you could use Kabbalah as a hachra. So someone asks Moshe, look, it's machloikis ha-Poskim. Should you make the bracha, should you not? So let's use the Arizal to be machriya. Says Rav Moshe, the principle that Kabbalah is machriya only applies to the Zohar HaKadosh. That when you have a Magen Avram saying ya, and you have a Gra saying nisht, and you don't know what to do, you follow the Zohar. Because the Zohar was written by Tanoim. But the Arizal does not add anything to the scale. Even if you have a Magen Avram against the Gra, if you put the Arizal on one side, it does not give us any further elucidation, says Rav Moshe. Says Rav Moshe, listen to this. Why? Avo kisvei ho'ari u'priyetz chayim av shegado ma'oid. Hu ke'echad mikol ha'poiskim. The Ari is only like one of the Poskim. Now listen to this. Rav Moshe really goes out on a limb. Even in matters of Kabbalah, you could argue on the Ari. Even in Kabbalah, you could argue on the Ari. Af b'divrei Kabbalah. Says Rav Moshe, we who are orphans of orphans, we who are poverty in Torah knowledge, is indescribable. We cannot say, well, the Magen Avram was 5 pounds, and the Magen Avram was 4.5, and you add the Arizal. We don't know who weighs what, or what adds more weight to the equation. If you have a machloikis, you could put the Ari on side A or side B. A machloikis is a machloikis, suffix bracha sahaka. And now I'm going to tell you another. So what are we learning? That while Rav Yaakov Hillel is saying, well, we might not learn Kabbalah, but at least our practice is all based on Kabbalah. Especially we all follow the Ari against the Shulchan Aruch, not so fast. Maybe Sfardim follow the Ari against the Shulchan Aruch, but Ashkenazim don't. So what's Rabbi Yaakov Hillel saying? Only Sfardim could bring Mashiach. But Ashkenazim, since we follow Shulchan Aruch, we can't bring Mashiach. Don't shake your head, right? But Ashkenazim, right? Ashkenazim can't bring Mashiach. We'll get you. Ashkenazim can't bring Mashiach. Well, Ashkenazim, we don't follow the Arizal. We hold the Arizal as ke'echem min ha-poiskim. Now I'm going to give you another illustration of this. Not everyone's going to like this, but what can we do? Kiddush. Should you stand or should you sit? You ready for this? Friday night, Shabbos day, anytime. Yom Tif. Should you stand or should you sit for Kiddush? Says Rav Moshe, in the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber says to sit. The Ramah says to sit. The Arizal says to stand. Now, what is that based on? Why would you stand for Kiddush? After all, when you make a bracha of Hamoitzi, you're supposed to be sitting. When you make a bracha of HaMitzvah, you're supposed to be sitting. What logic is there to stand? So, Al Pi Halacha and the Poskim say it. They all say to sit. The Ari says like this. In the Gemara and Shabbos is compared to a king and a queen. Now, a king and a queen does not require any brachos, do not require any sudos. But Al Pi Kabbalah, Shabbos is compared to a kala. Now, you ever go to a marriage ceremony, the Masader Kedushin, or the people making the Sheva brachos? Are they standing or are they sitting? They're standing. So therefore, the Ari says, since Shabbos is a kala, a bride, so the brachos are like Sheva brachos, so you should stand. So the Ari says to stand, and the Poskim say to sit. Says Rav Moshe, we don't follow the Ari against the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. If you're an Ashkenazi, you need to sit for Kiddush. Yeah, but what if my father stood? Says Rav Moshe the following. Technically speaking, it's not even a minhag. It's not even a minhag. It's not a minhag. The halacha, it's not a minhag. The halacha says to sit. What do you mean your father did? But, says Rav Moshe, you still shouldn't change because it's been going on for many, many years. But if you want to, you can. He's saying, I'm not recommending it, but Rav Moshe says if you want to sit for Kiddush, even if your father stood, you can. I'm not telling you to do it because it's been going on for a long time. But the Arizal said to stand. Says Rav Moshe Arizal was tremendous. But we don't follow him. We follow halacha.
Rav Moshe said?
Of course Rav Moshe said. And Rav Moshe says like this. Listen to this. Listen to this. No, so Rav Moshe says, for Vayichulu, you should stand, because it's Eidos. And the rest of Kiddush you sit. And says Rav Moshe, even those who don't want to change from what their parents did, that's only for Shabbos. But for Yom Tif, The Arizal never said Yom Tov Sakala. There's no such concept in Kabbalah, Yom Tov Sakala. So even if your father stood, you need to sit. That's what Moshe writes. Because we don't know what the Arizal did. I'm just telling you, Rav Moshe, and I'm not telling you what to do. You go home, you do whatever you want to do. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi, ask your father. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just reporting to you that when you have a machlokes between Shulchan Aruch and Ramah against the Arizal, when you have machlokes Shulchan Aruch and Ramah against Arizal, Rav Moshe says, we do not follow the Arizal. So very Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, he wants to answer up the Zohar, that how are we going to fulfill the Zohar's prediction? Oh, we fulfill it not through learning Kabbalah, but through our Hanhaga. Well, maybe that works for Sfardim, but for Ashkenazim, at least those who follow Rav Moshe, we do not paskin like the Arizal against the Paiskin. Comes Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef, and he says, not so fast for the Sfardim either. He said, I saw in many Svarim that they write like the Chidah. Again, what did the Chidah say? Chidah said that when you have an Ari against the Shulchan Aruch, the Svardim maintain that because the Beis Yosef didn't see the Ari, had he seen the Ari, he would have retracted. Says Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef, and you got to give him credit, he's a man of conviction, and he's not afraid to argue on the Chidah. This I was shocked. But you know what? Listen to what he says. Says the Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef. He quotes the Chidah who says that you always follow the Ari against the Shulchan Aruch. And he quotes the Ben Ish Chai who says you always follow the Ari against the Shulchan Aruch. And he quotes the Tshuva, the Chidah, that the Chidah says that the Beis Yosef didn't even know 100th of the Ari. His greatness. And he quotes the Stei Chemed who holds like that, and the Ben Ish Chai. Rabbi say you should know. Ben Ish Chai agrees to the Chidah. Says Rabbi Ovadiah, V'anoichi, and he writes this in Yabi Omer Chelik Beisim L'Chafei. V'anoichi ba'anyi loy zachisi lahavin minalan l'rabanin hanal umdin odzu. Where did these rabbanim get this from? That had the Beis Yosef known what the Arizal said, he would have retracted. How could they be so sure? Says Rav Ovadiah, I'm not taking anything away from the Ari. Nobody's saying. The Ari was Echad Min Kamai. He's like one of the Malachei Hasharis. Right? Kol HaKavod. But we hold, and if you want a bracha, you go to the Arizal. And if you want advice, go to the Arizal. And if you want to know what Avera you did 2 years ago that you need to rectify, go to the Arizal. And if you need something, go to the Arizal. But if you want to know Halacha, we don't go to the Arizal because we say, where did he get his Halacha from? Eliyahu Hanavi, Loi Bashamayim he. We do not follow his psakim. Says Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef. We follow the psakim of the Beis Yosef.
So he was sitting?
He says,
when you make Kiddush?
do I sit? I sit for Kiddush, yeah. So, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not. Right? I don't know where these tzaddikim got this from. I want you to see these words inside. We're number 22. About 1/3 of the way down, and the first word on the line is with a chaf and a little streichel. On the last words, he says, "Va'anoichi ba'ani lo yizachisi lav minalan la'rabbanim anal umdinazu she'ilu haya roya l'divrei Rabbeinu Ari haya paisakin v'hareim kol ha'kavod Rabbeinu Arizal." All the credit to the Arizal. Ateres b'rosh kol adam. Anan kaimalan loy b'shamayim hi mehechi teisi lahaniach divrei ha'poiskim ha'mefursamim. Who told you? Which birdie told you? Where did you get it from? That had the Beis Yosef seen the Ari, he would have retracted. Do you know what the Rambam says? The Rambam says that in this room right now, you had Yeshaya, Yecheskel, Yirmiyah, Hosea, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. You had 1,000 Nevi'im. And on the other side, you had Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Aaron Kotler, Rav Ovadiah Yosef, the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliashiv, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. You had 1,000 Nevi'im on one side, and 1,001 Chachamim on the other side. Acharei Rabbim Lahatos, we follow the 1,001 Chachamim. We don't listen to the Nevi'im. Yeah, if they want to tell us what the future has in store, we'll listen to Nevi'im. But not in Halacha. Since when does a Navi given any more credibility than a Chacham? There's no such thing in Judaism. We say, Loi Bashamayim hi. Now, I'll just tell you, if you want to know what Rabbi Yaakov Hillel holds, and what the Chidah holds, and what the Ben Ish Chai holds, they hold like this. That if somebody had a Nevuah, we don't follow them. But Eliyahu Hanavi is different. Eliyahu Hanavi, He was a chacham. He had smicha from Achi Hashiloini. So he is more begeder in this world. But nevertheless, says Rabbi Ovadiah, there's no difference between the Ari and any of the Nevi'im. We do not give more. The same way Rav Moshe says to the Ashkenazim. Ashkenazim follow Shulchan Aruch Ramah. They don't follow Ari. Says Rav Ovadiah, I'm with Rav Moshe for the Svardim also. Svardim follow Shulchan Aruch Ramah against. And in fact, says Rabbi Ovadiah, but look around. The Svardim are all making the bracha of Hanoisein Layoiv Kayach. Isn't that because they're going like the Arizal against the Shulchan Aruch? No. First of all, the Chidah himself said that somebody from the Knesset Hagdolah that the Shulchan Aruch was Chayzer. And even more so, it's not because of the Ari. You know what the proof is? Says Rabbi Ovadiah. Because a good Ashkenazi wouldn't follow the Ari over the Shulchan Aruch, and yet the Ashkenazim are making Hanois and Layav Kach. You see? Rabbi Ovadiah is backing up Rav Moshe. No good Ashkenazi would not sit by Kiddur, right? He's saying an Ashkenazi would of course follow Shulchan Aruch Ramah. Again, Rav Moshe said if you have a Hasidic minhag, fine. He said he's not telling you to change. If you want to, you can. He's not telling you to change. But he's just pointing out, like Rabbi Ovadiah and Rav Moshe both hold, that we don't follow Kabbalah over the Poskim. So says Rav Ovadiah, we're making Hanoisin Layoiv Kayach. It's not because of the Ari. And Beharaya, Ashkenazim make that bracha also.
What about the place of Pesach? The Seder of Pesach, you have Ari in the ground.
So that's why we follow the Halacha. Follow the Halacha.
What do you follow?
We follow the Halacha.
What do you follow?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Mishabru says only the Balabayas should have a Ka'ara. You know, Mishabru says only one Ka'ara Neser. So I go to the Balabayas' house. I don't make my own Seder. I go to someone's house. Whatever he does, I follow. Right? But if I had my own Seder, you should know what I follow by now, right? Says the Chassam Sofer. Says the Chassam Sofer. Listen carefully. Says the Chassam Sofer. Yes, the Zohar, Beruma Shalaylam. The Arizal, Beruma Shalaylam. But you should know that even though my Rabbeim were the all-time greatest Mikubalim, who were they? Rav Nosson Adler and the Hafla? I never heard them once say the word Zohar HaKadosh or Kisvei Ari in my life. Who said that? The Chassam Sofer said about his Rabbeim that he says, he takes a Shvuah.
Where it says that?
Number 24, the Chassam Sofer, Sim Kuf Tzadik Zayin. He takes a Shvuah that even though he did not leave the side of his Rabbeim, he never heard his Rabbeim invoke the Zohar or the Ari in their life. Now, by the way, the Chassam Sofer did invoke them. In the drushes, but he's just reporting, as great Mikabal as they were, they never invoked those names. Says the Chassam Sofer, look at number 23, that anybody who mixes Kabbalah into Halacha is over a lav in the Torah. Lo yisilbash klayim. You can't mix Kabbalah and Halacha. You want to learn Kabbalah? If you're a Makubal, wonderful. Do not bring it into the realm of Halacha. Says the Chassam Sofer. Now, by the way, you should know that Rabbi Yaakov Hillel has a whole parak to address this. So, don't think that we're just, here tonight in 1 hour we're proving one side. Who are we to do that? Don't think there's not what to say about this, but I'm just presenting to you that Rabbi Ovadiah Yosef quotes this Chassam Sofer on many, many occasions that I'm familiar with. He says, "V'chein ani omer, kol hama'arev divrei Kabbalah im ha'halacha is ha'psukim, chayiv mishum zoireya klayim." That's another example. So what we're learning is to be able to say that, who's going to bring Mashiach? We're going to bring Mashiach because even though we don't learn Kabbalah, our practice is based on Kabbalah. First of all, Ashkenazim would not agree to that. Ashkenazim would not say they follow the Ari. And even Sfardim, many Sfardim follow the camp of Rabbi Ovadiah, who says, Lechel Yosef, Kol Asher, Yomar Ta'aseh. You go to the Beis Yosef, you follow whatever he says. To say that it's the practice of Kabbalah, that's what the Zohar is referring to, perhaps, I think we have to say there must be another meaning and another dimension to the words of the Zohar, more than just based on our practice, because again, it's not really so clear that this should in fact be the practice of an observant Jew. So therefore, we would like to suggest the following. And that is, and I would venture to say, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel would agree with this also, and it's actually borrowed from another one of his Sfarim called Pesach Shar Shamayim. And that is like this. Let's take a look one more time at the language of the Zohar HaKadosh. Number 8. The Zohar says, Uvegin da'asidin Yisrael lemitam me'ilana dechaye. Because the Jews are destined to taste from the tree of life, Di'iyu ha'sefer Zohar, Yipkun bei min galusa barachamim. They are going to be redeemed. Now, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel wrote a sefer called Pesach Shar Shamayim, which is an introduction to people who want to begin learning Kabbalah. He tells you the basic fundamental principles. He tells you what midos a person needs to work on, what kind of hanhagos tovos a person has to acquire, and all the restrictions against learning the Zohar. We know the Shach writes that there's an opinion one should not learn until they're 40. By the way, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, in this generation, he advances the age. He brings it up. He makes it earlier. If anybody wants to know what age he says, you could come over to me afterwards. Rabbi Yaakov, but he lists many, many restrictions and hanhagos tovos a person should acquire before venturing into this. And then he says the following, that all of these criteria and ingredients are only needed for those who want to learn Kabbalah in its raw form. But what about if you just want to get a little flavor? Just want to get a little taste. You're not opening up the Arizal and learning about the Olam HaAtzilus and the Olam HaYetzira and the 10 Spheros and the 7 Spheros and are there 7 or are there 10. You're not talking about that. You just want to get a little flavor. You want to just breathe some life into your neshama, inflame your soul. If you want to get a taste for Kabbalah, says Reb Yaakov Hillel, no criteria necessary. Says Reb Yaakov Hillel. Look at number 28. Hine kol ha'amor, all the restrictions and all the criteria, hu bekesher lelimud sisrei haTorah gufan. That's if you're learning Kabbalah in its raw form. Hainu betzurasan hamufshetes. You want to learn bare Kabbalah. You want to learn the different worlds and the different spheros. The way that Arizal explains it. He says on the 5th line, Avolitoi ma'at divash. But to get a little taste, Rabbi, and if anyone's been coming to the Shiur, hopefully with this passage that we're reading from Rabbi Yaakov Hillel will give you an insight in what we're doing over here. Okay? To get a little flavor, to get a little taste, to touch the bottom end of the pole of Kabbalah, to ennoble your soul, to inflame your soul, to get a little hislavos, to open up your mind, to get a little deeper understanding of the purpose of mitzvahs and what tshuva is and what a person needs to accomplish in this world, to expand your horizons, what tefillah is, what a mitzvah accomplishes. Says Rav Yaakov Hillel, Zeh behechleit mutter. This is absolutely permitted. We're not opening up Kisvei Arizal and reading straight. We're taking what an Achroin quotes from the Ari, and in other words, you're not going to make a science experiment in your house, but under a special, safe conditions, with the supervision of a scientist, he could give you a little experiment so you get a little flavor for what's going on in the lab. Obviously, to go out on your own and start mixing different chemicals, you're going to blow up the house. But in a controlled environment, to get a little flavor, that's permitted, says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel Ba'afilu Nachutz. You have to do it. If you want to be a viable Jew today, if you want to be a Jew who's alive, who comes to shul in the morning, you want to have some feeling for your davening, you want to open up the Nefesh HaChaim and see how he quotes the Zohar, what your tefillah is accomplishing. What? You're not allowed to learn Nefesh HaChaim unless you go to the mikveh first and you fast for 40 days? Of course not. Nobody ever said there are any restrictions on learning Sefer Nefesh HaChaim, even though the Nefesh HaChaim quotes the Zohar probably at least 300 times. You ever hear anyone say, look, we have that 50 Svarim from the Chafetz Chaim on the shelf, Shmiras Haloshen. Every single page is Zohar, 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 Zohar. You ever hear anyone say you can't learn the Chafetz Chaim? Today you have to learn the Chafetz Chaim every day. Right? Shmiras Hayalosh and Yomi. If I learn Shmiras Hayalosh and Yomi, I'm going to be learning hundreds of passages of the Zohar. Does anyone say you can't learn Mesilas Yesharim? Or you can't learn Sifrei Chasidus? Or you can't learn Sifrei Machshava, which are all based on the holy foundations of the Zohar? Nobody says such a thing. Not only does no one say we're required to learn. If a Jew just learns Gemara and he does not expand his mind and his horizons and his understanding of Tefillah, his understanding of mitzvahs based on Sfarim that are primarily based on the Ari and the Zohar, he's very much in the dark. So says Rav Yaakov Hillel, to learn learn Kabbalah, you can't do unless you meet certain criteria. You got to be 40 years old. You have to go to the mikvah and so forth. But to get a flavor, to get a taste, there are no restrictions. You got to do that. Just to give you a little analogy, during the 9 days, yeah? You're not allowed to eat meat. Can't eat meat during the 9 days. But what about a woman, Erev Shabbos? She wants to taste the cholent. Could she taste meat Erev Shabbos? Says the Chavos Yair, Paskin Halacha L'Maisa, of course she can. What do you mean? You can't eat meat. You can't eat it, but you're allowed to taste it. Tasting is different than eating. Tasting is different. Te'ima is different than eating. There are poskim, we don't hold this way, that if you make a bracha on milk within 6 hours of meat, you eat it. Take a little taste. We don't pass that way. Some I don't know. I don't know about the Sfardim. I don't know about that. But Ashkenazim don't. Why? Tasting is different than eating. You see, you're allowed to taste the meat in the 9 days for Shabbos. So you take the analogy to its logical conclusion. If learning Gemara is meat, and learning Mishnah is bread, and learning Kabbalah is dessert, so of course everyone would say you can't eat dessert before the meal. If somebody, before his mother serves him a meal, sneaks into the freezer and eats a big piece of chocolate cream pie, you're not going to have an appetite. You're going to destroy. You're not going to be able to eat properly. But would anyone say, if your mother calls you in the kitchen and says, here's a little taste of the dessert, would anyone say, no, you're not allowed to do that? No, it's not going to harm your appetite. If anything, it will enhance your appetite. It will elicit more appetite. So says Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, to learn Kabbalah, you have to be on a very high level. Who could say they're on such a level? But to get a little flavor, to get a little taste, through the medium of a trustworthy source, through the Chafetz Chaim, through Achronim, through Svarim of Gedolim who are on that level, and they're serving it to us in a temperature-controlled environment, and with supervision, nobody would say you can't do that. If anything, this is very important in our generation, to give a little fire to our observance. And if you look carefully at the Lashon of the Zohar doesn't say that before Mashiach comes, everyone's going to be learning the Zohar. The Zohar says, Uvegin da'asidin Yisrael lemitam. Because the Jewish people will take a taste, meilana dechaye, that will bring the Geula. So perhaps we don't have to say that this necessarily shows, like Rabbi Yaakov Hillel says in the Chida and the Ben Ish Chai, that we always in practice follow the Arizal over Maran Bet Yosef. No, you could also be a good Jew and follow Rav Ovadiah Yosef, and you follow the Shulchan Aruch over the Arizal, or you follow Rav Moshe, you follow the Poskim over the Arizal. But who's going to fulfill the taste of Kabbalah to bring Mashiach? All the Bnei Torah, and all the Bnei Yeshiva, and all the Chashva Balabatim, and all the Shomer Torah mitzvahs. They spend time learning Mesilas Yesharim. They spend time learning Nefesh HaChaim and Shmiras Haloshim, and all the Sifrei Musar, and all the Sifrei Machshava that are Malei V'Gadish, that are full and overflowing with these ideas and these fundamental principles. And in that schus, we should all be Zoicha to be Yipkun Min Galusa Barachamei B'Bias Galtzeg M'her V'Yameinu. Amen. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.